Hey everybody, Sarah here. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Please excuse my voice. I have been under the weather this past week. I'm still trying to get over it, but hey, videos need to be recorded, so such is life. Just bear with me. Nonetheless, if this is your first time tuning into this channel, thank you so much for tuning in. I upload faith-based teaching videos every single Wednesday, and we go through books of the Bible. We do videos on dating, relationships, Bible study tips, prayer, and anything that can ultimately help push you closer in your walk with Christ. So please consider subscribing. So as you already know, we're going through a series entitled Women of the Word. And this week we are going to talk about Queen Esther, and I'm so excited about it. Esther is an entire book in the Bible, and we're not doing a full Bible study through every chapter, at least not right now anyways. So I really just wanted to highlight a few things that the Lord highlighted from her story that can encourage us and things that we can apply today that are going to glorify God. So let's start off with some background and some context to what's going on. In chapter 1, Esther is not even on the scene yet. King Ahasuerus, now no idea if I'm saying that right, King A was ruling at this time, and Queen Vashti, Queen V, was his queen at the time. So what had happened was the king requested the presence of his queen, Queen V, and she did not come. She completely rebelled and she did not obey. She completely ignored his request and did not come. So because of that, the king and his men decided to find a new queen, one that would be obedient to him, right? So in chapter 2, they sought out a young virgin to become the new queen, which is where Esther comes into the story. She was one of the young women who was in the running, if you will, to become the next queen. And one thing that I just found out was interesting is that I had no idea that Esther was not her real name. Esther was her Persian name that was given to her. So that's something that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to point out and share with you guys, because I ain't know. So if I didn't know, I'm sure somebody else didn't know either. And something else that I wanted to point out that I'm sure most of us knew, or even if you didn't know, is that Esther was an orphan. Her mother and her father had passed away, and Mordecai raised her as if she was his own. And the thing that I love about that is that God can use you no matter what your background is. Just because you're an orphan, just because you were homeless, just because you were this, does not mean that you can't be something else in the future. Your past does not dictate your future and what God can do for you. So as we can see, as you go through chapter 2, you can see that Esther found favor with the person who had charge over the young women that came in to be seen by the king. And though it does state that Esther was beautiful on the outside, and they even went through a beautification process that they did back then, I believe that though she was beautiful on the outside, that there was something on the inside of Esther, her character, that made her even more beautiful, that she found favor with everybody that she came into contact with. All throughout the book of Esther, you just see that she found favor in the sight of this person. She found favor with this person. Like, she found favor with a lot of people. When somebody favors you, you receive things that you don't even deserve. And I don't know about y'all, but I am so glad that God favors us, that we get things that we don't deserve, that God blesses us, that he is merciful, and that he is gracious and just lavishes those things on us. So something that is key to note in this story is that Mordecai instructed Esther to not disclose the fact that she was a Jew. And this can lead us to understand that there was some type of disdain towards Jews at this time, and that they were not in the presence of other Jews, obviously, for him to instruct her to disclose the fact that she was a Jew. And something that I love about Esther, and a point that I really want to highlight for us as women, and in general, if there's men watching this, and in general, is that Esther obeyed Mordecai when he told her not to disclose the fact that she was a Jew. And she obeyed the person that was in charge of the women. This shows the humility of Esther. She was obedient and she was humble. She sought their wisdom. She sought advice from them, and she obeyed what they told her to do. Are we humbling ourselves to heed the wisdom and advice from others, the people that are our supervisors, our pastor, our leaders? Are we seeking their advice? Are we seeking their wisdom, or do we think we know everything? God can only exalt the humble. How do you think she became queen? It wasn't because she thought she knew everything. She knew she was cute and she was like, I'm cute, he gonna choose me to be queen. No, she was humble. That's how you get favor from people, with a humble spirit and a humble attitude. Because you don't want to promote somebody that's prideful. Even in the natural, you're not going to promote somebody that's prideful. And you know God sure isn't going to promote somebody that's prideful. He's not going to exalt you if you're prideful. He's not going to exalt you if you think you know everything, because then you're going to try to do it outside of him, without him. His hand's not going to be on it, and you're not going to be concerned about his glory. Only the humble can be exalted. So we can even see in that. That's scripture in 1 Peter. The humble get exalted, and I love that so much. You don't seek humility to be exalted. You seek humility so that God can be glorified. And something that is key is verse 14. Yes, Esther starts out as the king's concubine, but the thing that I want us to notice is that you are not allowed to go into the king's presence without him inviting you first. It could lead to death. That's how serious it is. You don't just go up to the king and, hey, what's up, king? No, you can die if you just go up to the king without him inviting you. So that is something that I want us to notice, and I want us to remember. Highlight it in your Bible, underline it, whatever the case is. Just make sure that you make note of that. And again, in verse 17, we can see that Esther, again, she has won favor with the king, and he's pleased with her above all the other women that have been in his presence, up to the point that he makes her queen. And look, nothing happens by chance. I mean, Esther was an orphan, so how in the world she end up in the king's presence? So how did she end up being queen? How did she end up being in the king's presence as an orphan? But she was there because God placed her there, despite the fact that she was a Jew. So we know that Esther is most famous or most known because she saved the Jews. But why did the Jews need saving? So Haman was, I believe I'm saying that right yet again, was one of the men that was a part of the king's people. Basically, he was mad because Mordecai did not bow down to him. And once he discovered that Mordecai was a Jew, he decided to take out his frustration and his anger on every Jew and to have them all murdered. And he got the king's signet, wrote a letter, put the signet on it, which was basically like a modern day stamp, for that document to go out and for it to spread and for it to happen. Y'all have got to read the book of Esther to see what happened to Haman. I might have to do a Bible study on it because I don't want to get too much into Mordecai, but it's so good, you guys. Haman ends up literally the ditch and the grave and the rope that he planned to hang Mordecai with, he ends up getting hanged on. The ditch that you dig for somebody else is going to be the ditch that you end up being in, okay? Haman thought he had power because he had the king's signet, but he ain't had no real power. No power can stand against the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So in chapter 4, verse 14, we can see why Esther has been made queen, even though she is a Jew. God specifically placed her in the palace to be a queen, not just a concubine, not just a servant, but queen for such a time as that, to save the Jews. He positioned her at just the right time so she can be in position to save her people. She was on mission from the Lord. How many of us realize that where we are on mission from the Lord? It may not make sense, it may not feel good, but we're on mission. We're specifically placed where we are for such a time as this. And the mission that God places us on is not just for you. It's to benefit other people. It can even benefit a whole nation. It can affect generations. And it's interesting that Mordecai is the one that had to tell her. He's the one that had to point it out. Sometimes we don't even realize why we are where we are. But that's the beauty of having wisdom and accountability and community in your life, for them to pour into you, for them to help open up your eyes. So Mordecai asked her to go into the king's presence, even though she had not been called for. She knew that meant she could possibly die. So her immediate response was to fast and to seek and to have others fast with her. And I love that that was her immediate response. What is our immediate response when we run into challenges, when we run into difficulties, when we face trials that literally can take us out? Are we fasting? Are we praying? Are we seeking God? Or are we just walking around in fear? Are we just leaning to our own understanding, doing what we think is best? The second thing that I want to highlight is that Esther was a woman of faith. Her first response was to fast, and I want us to be women of faith who truly have faith. We don't just talk about it, but we walk it out. Our first response is to pray. Our first response is to fast. Our first response is ultimately to seek the Lord in everything that we do. No, we're not going to be perfect, but are we striving? Are we seeking God above all else? And even though Esther knew that this could mean death for her, she was willing to die. And everything that we read in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, points back to the New Testament. It points back to the coming Messiah. So in this is where I see the story of Jesus highlighted so much in the story of Esther. She was willing to die for the mission. Esther was willing to sacrifice herself for the sake of the whole nation, for the sake of Jews, for the sake of her people. And Jesus did sacrifice himself for the sake of us because of his love for us. Yet Jesus sacrificed himself that we may benefit, that we can be saved from our enemy. And this even gives us hope that our enemy will one day be finally destroyed. We can have hope that he has no power. I've been saying it so time and time again. The devil has no real power, y'all. He has no power. Woo! Esther stood in the king's presence on behalf of her people. She acted as a mediator. Don't that sound real familiar? Jesus stood in our place on the cross, taking on the full wrath of God. Jesus stood in our place on our behalf, bridging the gap between us and the Father so that we can be right with him, so that we can be saved from eternal damnation, so that we don't have to worry about our enemy anymore. The thing is, God responds to our faith. Esther stepped out in faith and went to the king's presence without being called for, and he found favor in her sight and was pleased to see her. He was going to do anything she asked him to do. And in chapter 5, we see even more of the humility of Esther. If it pleases the Lord, like, she didn't just go say, "Hey, king, I'm your queen. Your boy is tripping over here. You need to check him." No, she went humbly. She laid out a whole banquet. God's hand was over the Jews the entire time. And Mordecai, there was no reason for any of them to fear because God was still with them. He went before them and placed Esther in the palace. He placed Esther to be as queen. Even before any of this stuff had came up, she was queen. So God had already went before them. And then that goes to show that God is intentional. Nothing takes him by surprise. He doesn't make any mistakes. He knows exactly what he's doing. So when we face problems and when we face trials, we can have confidence in our God that he's not surprised by what's going on. He's already gone before us. Like, God is in control. Nothing takes him by surprise at all. Nothing that happened in this story, in the life of Esther and what happened with the Jews, took him by surprise at all. This was all a part of his plan. And he got all the glory. Nothing that happens in our lives and the thing in the world even takes God by surprise. He orchestrates it all. He allows it all. And he allows everything to happen so that he ultimately can get the glory out of it. So yeah, just to wrap it up, the 3 high things that I wanted to highlight from the story of Esther. Again, I might have to do a full Bible study on the whole book because it's so good. I really encourage you to read the whole thing. It's really good, especially how everything happened with Mordecai and Haman and how the Lord literally made his enemy his footstool, literally. It's just so good. And again, those 3 things is that Esther was humble. Her first response was to seek the Lord. She was a woman of faith. And lastly is that she was selfless and willing to sacrifice herself for the mission and for the glory of God. So yeah, I pray that you guys were blessed by that. I pray that you really received something from that. Let me know in the comment sections below what the Lord spoke to you specifically and how you can apply that to your life, those 3 things. And if you learned anything new about Esther, if you read the whole story, let me know down below, because I literally might have to do a Bible study on that. It was so good. So yeah, just pray that it blessed you again. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you are subscribed so you never miss another video just like this every single Wednesday. Grace and peace.